So welcome to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over some GCSE Maths exam questions related to percentages. Now as always, I'll include a copy of the questions that we go through in this video as a link in the description for you to download and have an attempt at before watching through this video, so you can see what your prior knowledge is going to look like. And I'll also include some lesson links that go through the particular aspects of percentages in more detail in the description as well. Now before we get started working through some past exam questions related to percentages, let's just have a quick overview over what it is you need to know. So the first things first, what we need to know is non-calculator and calculator methods, and it's really important that you do know the methods of both and as many different variations of it as possible. So for example, if you're doing foundation, you may probably more used to the fraction method of working out percentages, in which then you need to be aware of decimal multipliers, which is the next thing that's mentioned. I don't know why I'm crossing it off there, so let me just get the highlighter back on. And if you know decimal multipliers, then you also need to know the fractional versions of it as well. The other thing you need to know is fraction decimals percentage conversions. So again, it is typical that you need to know the decimal equivalent and the fractional equivalent of 1%, 5%, 10%, 25%, 50%, 75%, but more of the obscure ones like an eighth, a fifth, and a third. You also need to know about percentage increase and decrease, and this is where I would encourage the use of decimal multipliers. Now when using decimal multipliers, again remember that you always start with 100%. And then either add or subtract the percentage and then convert that final percentage into a decimal. Now when it comes to percentage change, the formula is the difference divided by the original multiplied by 100, and that will give you the percentage change. Now if your answer is positive, then it's percentage increase. If it's less than 0, it's going to be a percentage decrease. So again, be aware of those. The next one is reverse percentages. Now remember, with reverse percentages, if you're starting with the old price to new price, then to go from old to new, you multiply by the decimal multiplier. To go from new to old, you divide by the decimal multiplier. And then the last thing is compound interest and simple interest. And the key thing there is know the difference between the two. Now, compound interest is also known as repeated percentage change. So that's why you repeat it, in which the formula for compound interest is the original amount multiplied by the decimal multiplier after the increase or decrease to the power of however long you're doing it for. With simple interest, that's basically calculating the interest amount on the first year and then multiplying that by the number of years that you're then having the simple interest for. So again, there is a difference between the two. Simple interest, where the interest amount is fixed and stays fixed. Compound interest is where the increase or decrease amount will increase or decrease respectively. Now it's worth mentioning that there will be separate videos going through some topic tests and exam questions on percentage change and reverse percentages, and there's already one that's been done on compound interest. So again, if you're wanting further practice of those, then feel free to check it out. We'll include links to all of these topics and their topic tests in the description below. So without further ado, let's get started on these questions. Now again, a reminder, if you're wanting access to these questions, all you need to do is just simply click on the link in the description. So looking at question 1, it says 88% of the world's population is right-handed. What percentage is left-handed? So again, for 1 mark, it's just going to be 100% minus 88%, which is 12%. Then for question 2, it says complete the table below. So all we need to do is just do the decimal, percentage and fractional equivalents. So for half, it's going to be 0.5 and the percentage is 50%. And then fraction for 0.25 is a quarter, and that is 25%. And for 75%, decimal is going to be 0.75 and the fraction is going to be 3/4. Now it is important that you do simplify your fractions. So if you did write 75 over 100, that's still going to be fine, but try and get in the practice of always simplifying your fractions. Moving on to question 3, it says find 10% of 70. So again, all we need to do is just move the decimal point 1 place to the left, in which we should get an answer of 7. You don't want to write with highlighters, so let me just write down 7. Question 4, it says shade 33.33% of the grid below. So it's recognizing that this is a third. And so what I need to do then is shade a third of this. Now it's already split up into three since in terms of boxes of 5. So all I need to do is just shade in any 5 boxes. And just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to do it for the top row. So basically shade any 5 boxes. Moving on to question 5, it says that John scores 9 out of 20 in a maths test. What is his score as a percentage? So it's going to be 9 over 20, and you can either multiply that by 100 or you can work with equivalent fractions, in which we want to get the denominator 100, so I need to multiply that by 5. So I multiply the numerator by 5, in which I get 45. So then the answer is going to be 45%. Moving on to question 6, it says write the following in ascending order. Now when ordering FDPs, you want to make sure that they're all in the same FDP. So the easiest way to order it is to convert them all into decimals. So this is going to be 0.35. This has already been is a decimal. So all that's left for me to do is to convert 3/8 as a decimal. Now again, this is one that you should already know, but if you don't, not a problem. Just do some division to work it out. So here we've got 0, carry the 3. That's going to be 3, carry the 6. That's going to be 7, carry the 4. And then we've got 5. So that's going to be 0.375. So then putting them in ascending order, we're going from smallest to biggest. So it's going to be 35%, then 0.36, and then 3/8. Now ideally, would you lose marks if I wrote the answer in all decimals? Probably not, but what you want to try and do is make sure that you're using the original format when you're doing your ordering. Moving on to question 7, it says in a sale all items are reduced by 15%, and then for 7/8 it says find 15% of 24. Well again, if it's on a calculator, you're doing 0.15 times 24. If it's non-calc, well 10% is £2.40. 5% is going to be half of that, which is £1.20. So 15% is going to be those two amounts added together, which come up to £3.60. Then moving on to 7b, it says find the price of the shirt marked £24. So we're getting £3.60 discount, so it's going to be 24 minus 3.60, which gives me an answer of £20.40. Moving on to question 8, it says find the simple interest earned on when £400 is invested at 3% for 5 years. So 3% of 400. Well, 1% is going to equal 4. So therefore 3% is going to be 3 times that, which is £12. And then we're going for 5 years, so it's going to be £12 multiplied by 5, which gives me an answer of £60. Question 9, it says the quantity is doubled in size. By what percentage has it been increased by? And it says circle your answer. Now the answer you want to circle then is 100, because you're doubling, so you're increasing by 100%. Moving on to question 10, it says which of the following statements is definitely false? Tick your answer. Now the correct answer is going to be that I ate 120% of a cake. Now that's going to be impossible because you can only eat 100% of a cake, but let me just quickly explain why the others aren't correct. So I blew up a balloon by 120% of its original size. Well, that is possible because a balloon, if you think about it, when it's deflated is quite small, but when it's inflated the size is going to be more so than double. The third option, it says I need to use 120% of the quantities in a recipe to change a recipe for 5 people into one for 6 people. And again, that's going to be true because again, you're cooking for more people, so you need more of the original ingredients. And then the last one says the height of a sunflower more than doubled in size because the height increased by 120%. Well, as discussed in the previous question, when you're doubling something, you're increasing by 100%. So 120% is more than double. So that's why that is correct. Moving on to question 11, it says 40% of the trees in a wood are diseased. 75% of the trees in the wood are elm. Work out the least possible percentage of trees in a wood that are diseased elms. Now, there's a couple of ways in which you could answer this particular question. One way is to see that we've got 75 plus 40, and that gives me 115%, and that's basically an excess of 15%. So there is my answer. Another way of looking at it, which is less cryptic, well, basically, if we look at that 25%, if 75% of the trees are elm, then 25% are not elm. Now, if we look at the 40% of trees that are diseased, well, if 40%, let me write, so if all 25% of not elm were diseased, then 15% must be elm and disease. So that's going to be the smallest amount that could be elm and diseased, given those initial percentages at the start of the question. Moving on to question 12, it says Sofas Are Us increases its prices by 10% and then reduces it by 5%. Sofas So Good reduced its price by 5% and then increased by 10%. Which shop increased its prices by the greater percentage? And you need to circle our answer. So for this, well, I'll do part B first because it says explain your answer. Well, if I look at Sofas Are Us, and I look at the statement and use decimal multipliers, then increasing by 10% is multiplying by 1.1, and decreasing by 5% is then multiplying by 0.95. And if I word that on my calculator, I get an answer of 1.045. Then if I look at Sofa So Good, then that has an initial reduction of 5%, which is 0.95. I then multiply that by an increase of 10%, which is 1.1. And as you can see, those answers are the same. So the one I need to circle for part A is both the same, and then my working needs to be that. Don't worry about that multiplication there. Moving on to question 13, it says that a square has a side of 8 centimeters. The area of the square is increased by 50%. Work out the percentage increase in the length of the side. So looking at this, if we look at the original area, well, that's going to be 8 times 8, which is 64 centimeters square. So then the new area is increased by 50%, so that's going to be 64 times 1.5, or 50% is going to be 32, so we add that to 64, which gives me 96. Now the square root of 96, so the new length side, or side length I should say, is going to equal square root of 96, and the square root of 96 is 9.8. So then working out the percentage change, it's going to be the difference between the lengths, which is 1.8, divided by the original, which is 8, and then multiply that by 100, in which I get an answer of 22.5. Another way of looking at it, if you're familiar with area scale factors, well, if the area scale factor is 1.5, then that means that the length scale factor is going to be the square root of 1.5, which gives me an answer of 1.2247, which, knowing your percentages, that's an increase of 22.5%. So any of those methods would be good enough for the 4 marks. Then moving on to our last question, it says that A is 30% of B, B is 90% of C. What is percentage of C is A? So looking at this first statement, then what I get is that A equals 0.3 of B. Then looking at the second statement, I get that B is equal to 0.9 C. Now in both the equations, what I want to try and do is get the same amount of B's. So if I multiply all of this by 10, then I get 10A equals 3b. If I then multiply all of this by 3, then I get 3b equals 2.7 c. So now that my b's are the same, then that means that 10a must equal 2.7 c. So 10a equals 2.7 c. Then if I make a the subject, I get a equals 2.7 over 10 c. Then writing an equivalent fraction of this, I get a equals 27 over 100 c. So what's this as a percentage? Well, it's going to be 27. And there we go.